I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Authority Board of Directors meeting, Wednesday, March 11th. Contrary to rumors, I am not Larry Klein, the chair. I am Sally Meadows, vice chair. So I will do my best to uphold his high standards for our meeting tonight. Would you like to take the roll call and establish quorum?
Yes, please. Director Srinivasan.
Here, once again, I am not Larry Klein.
Thank you. Director Page.
Present.
Barbadillo.
Here.
Fruin.
Here.
Vice Chair Meadows.
Here.
Showalter.
Here.
Lee. Risto.
Here.
Swan.
Here.
And joining remotely, Director Hilton.
Here.
All right, very good. So first off, we'll take public comment on matters not on the agenda. Do we have any speakers in chambers? Not seeing anyone. Anyone online?
None online, Chair. And if I could have Director Hilton actually make a statement on his participation this evening.
All right.
Thank you. I am participating remotely under the Just Cause provision of the Brown Act.
You're muted, I think, or we can't hear you.
You can't hear me? Can you hear me now?
An audio issue, just a moment.
All right.
Can you try again, Director Hilton?
Can you hear me now?
Thank you. We'll troubleshoot in the chambers, but I'm getting word that on Zoom they are able to hear.
Okay. All right. Should we move on then? And he'll clarify when we've got him on. Okay,
Yes.
Great. So we're going to move on to the consent calendar, but with that consent calendar, I'm going to actually make a proposal of my colleagues, which is to take item number 4 and place that in consent if nobody objects. To remind you, item number 4 is to adopt resolution approving changing Silicon Valley Clean Energy's fiscal year period from October to September to a calendar year period instead. And we thought we'd move that to consent unless there's any objections. All right. I see no objections. Do we need a motion, Council? I don't.
Do not.
Okay, so we'll do that. So the consent calendar then is going to be 1A through 1O and number 4. Do any of my colleagues want to pull anything on consent or ask any questions or discuss? That is a silence that says no. Do we have any public comment on the consent calendar?
No public comment.
Okay, so I would like to have a motion for 1A through 1O plus item number 4.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
And
Thank you. I'll proceed with our roll call. Director Risto.
Yeah, aye.
Barbadillo.
Aye.
Showalter. Lee.
Aye.
Page.
Aye.
Meadows.
aye.
Srinivasan.
Aye.
Swan.
Aye.
Fruin.
Aye.
And Director Hilton, I don't know if we have resolved our audio issues, but a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries.
Okay, very good. So regular calendar, first item is the CEO report.
All right. Good evening, directors, acting chair Meadow. I want to bring up Pam Leonard, our director of marketing and communications, to give you to announce the home tours that are happening this weekend in your communities. And then I have a short update on our clean power position.
Do I have the controls somewhere?
Oh, I can just go. Oh, okay, here we are.
Okay.
Good evening, directors. Just wanted to let you know that Actera is hosting a green home tour this Saturday from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. And the follow-up from this meeting will include a link to register, but it does feature 7 homes in Saratoga, Cupertino, and Los Altos who are participating. The tour is meant to focus on those communities, and it's a chance for other residents who are considering electrification to see from their neighbors and friends and other community members how to go electric, what was their journey, and if maybe you've never touched a heat pump water heater before, you might get the chance. So we will be sharing out information about that and just wanted to call that to your attention. And it's being sponsored by Silicon Valley Clean Energy as well as the Rotary Clubs of Los Altos, Saratoga, and Cupertino. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam.
Okay, so every month as part of the CEO report, I include an update on our clean position, and there's an attachment in your CEO report that also talks about our clean procurement efforts. But I wanted to highlight a few things from that report. First of all, we recently issued a request for offers, which closed on March 4th, to solicit for new renewable portfolio standard resources and carbon-free resources and resources to meet our reliability needs. In addition to that, while the RFO was out on the street, we also got word from the California Public Utility Commission that they were going to order a new procurement order for clean, reliable resources. And so this RFO is also intended to help find resources to meet that new guidance requirement. We hope to shortlist and release one or two contracts to the board for consideration later this fall or by the end of the year. I also want to let you know that for calendar year 2025, which is over, but we're still getting all the final information into our books, we expect to be 107% clean. That's retail sales. And the mix for 2025 looks something like this, is what we expect. 9% of those resources will come from geothermal, 1% from small hydro, 27% from solar, 12% from wind, 33% from large hydro, and 25% from nuclear. We're also on track to meet our 100%, 105% clean for 2026. Other thing to highlight in the CEO report is that we have several new projects. These are new clean resources coming onto the grid in California and in the West this year, including 125 megawatts that'll be our share of a new wind resource located in New Mexico called the Sanzia Pattern Project. That's going to be online next month, and there will be a ribbon cutting hopefully sometime in June. We also have a solar plus storage project called Angela. It's a 20 megawatt solar with a 10 megawatt 4-hour battery that's coming online in May. We have another solar plus storage project called Aratina. That's an 80 megawatt solar with a 50 megawatt battery coming online in June as well, in June. And then last but not least, something that was very new to us is a long duration storage resource that we contracted along with 6 other CCAs as part of California Community Power. It was the first contract that we signed back in 2021, I believe. And so that's coming online. It's called the Tumbleweed Project. Our share is 16 megawatts of long duration storage, and that'll be online in June. And we'll have our very first ribbon cutting event with CC Power in June. So we're quite excited to bring this news to you because these projects, as some of you are aware, have faced many delays, many issues. And so bringing them online is like one step forward and meeting our clean goals. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions about this item or any other items that are included in the CEO report.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions for CEO? All right. My neck is not used to this much craning, so. All right, very good.
That concludes my CEO report.
All right, thank you very much. And do we still, we don't have Director Hilton audible?
I'd actually like to test Director Hilton, if you wouldn't mind saying something.
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'll read the statement really quick. I am participating remotely under the Just Cause provision of the Brown Act due to travel for official business of another local agency. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Hilton.
Okay, so we can move on then to item number 3, receive the financial audit results and accept the findings from the independent auditor. Oh, Brian.
Okay.
Perfect timing. You're welcome to go ahead, Amrit, when you're ready. We're just being, Director Mekachek is just joining us. He knows the material well, I'm sure.
Awesome. I'll just take a minute to introduce the item before the auditor presents it. So this is the completion of the financial audit for the fiscal year of 24-25 that began October 1, 2024 and ended September 30th, 2025. A little bit about the process before the audit. Before commencing the audit, the independent auditors met with the audit committee, presented the plan and proposal for conducting the audit. So the auditors had a chance to review that before the audit began. And at the conclusion of the audit, the auditors presented the results last week to the audit committee, and the audit committee engaged in a discussion with the auditors and unanimously recommend that the board accept the audit findings. Also, the auditors had a chance to meet independently, one-on-one, with the audit chair to review the draft financials before they were finalized. And also, the audit chair had the opportunity to meet with management and review the draft financials. With that, I would like to hand it over to Kellen Gilbert and his team from Soren, our independent external auditor.
Thank you very much for the introduction. If you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide, please. So as Emmerich just said, my name is Kellen Gilbert. I'm the lead audit partner on the engagement, and also part of the team is Alejandra Schaefer, who is the engagement supervisor, and Alana Rico, who was the engagement senior on the audit. Next slide, please. I want to start with just a little bit of a brief introduction to Soren CPAs. As of May of 2025, Pacinti and Brinker, who has been practicing accounting in the North Bay for almost 60 years, we decided to combine practices with a number of like-sized firms and rebrand as one unified firm, Soren. This was a really important strategic merger for us, providing us with a lot of resources, allowing us to make strategic investments in technology, audit software, artificial intelligence, most importantly, our people, while also letting us maintain a level of local control that we think best situates us to continue to serve our clients in the same manner that we have for the past, like I said, almost 60 years. So Soren is now a top 50 firm. We have over 23 office locations and over 1,000 employees. But most importantly, to my clients, they always want to know, is there any changes to the fees, to the timing of the engagements, to the cost of the engagements? And I'm happy to report that there are no changes. Everything is continuing to run smoothly as it previously was under Pacinti and Brinker. Next slide, please. So the audit at this point is complete. We issued an unmodified opinion, which is audit speak for a clean audit report, which means that the financial statements are free of material misstatement. And we did not identify any deficiencies in internal controls or material weaknesses. Next slide, please. The relative roles and responsibilities, I believe this is an important slide for any public forum. It's just a reminder that management is responsible for preparing the financial statements, all the information within the financial statements, and most importantly, maintaining a system of internal control to ensure the accuracy of those financial statements. As the auditor, we're responsible for providing our opinion on whether or not the financial statements are free of material misstatement. And we do that through a number of techniques, starting with our consideration of internal controls, our planning, performing tests of year-end balances, analytical procedures, and other auditing techniques, and evaluating the adequacy of footnote disclosures. Next slide, please. So a little bit more about our audit risk-based approach. This is the approach that the professional standards provide for us, saying that we should spend our time using auditing techniques in the area that we consider to be the most at risk for a material misstatement. And first we have to determine what that would be. And that's our planning phase. We gain an understanding of the entity's operating characteristics, practices, procedures, policies. We compare our knowledge of similar entities, and then we do what we call walkthrough procedures, where we actually meet with staff to make sure that the actual processes and controls that are written are actually being followed. So we do all of that as part of our planning phase to determine then ultimately which additional audit techniques we'll use to complete the audit. Next slide, please. So once we've completed our planning phase, this is some of the significant areas that we audited. This is not meant to be a complete list, but just a high-level overview of some of the procedures that we performed. Revenue recognition, accounts receivable, and accrued revenue. It's always a significant area for any audit. We tested a sample of customer billings, looking for existence and occurrence. We looked at total cash received during the year to total revenue as a reasonableness analytic. We tested a sample of revenue transactions throughout the year, not just at year end, for making sure that revenue is being recognized consistently throughout the year. And then we also tested receivables as of year end, again, looking for valuation and existence. Cash and investments, always a very important aspect of any audit. Relatively easy area to audit. We use third-party confirmations, again, for valuation and existence to make sure that that cash does exist and is valued correctly. The accrued cost of electricity and other current liabilities, a very big part of your financial statements. We look at subsequent payments and tie those back to underlying documentation to make sure that all the expenses that should be recorded in the proper period are in fact recorded. And we're looking for cutoff and completeness related to those expenses. And last but not least, the financial statement footnote disclosures. We read the footnote disclosures for accuracy, completeness, and also to make sure that they're without bias, meaning that there isn't an area where management could potentially mislead the readers of the financial statements. Next slide, please. So these are just some required communications that to those charged with governance, which is this body. As discussed in note 11, SVCE adopted GASB 102 and 104, which did not have a material impact on the financial statements. We did not propose any audit adjustments to the financial statements. We didn't identify any unusual transactions where there was a lack of authoritative guidance. And there has been no disagreements with management concerning the scope of the audit, which means that we were provided access to all the underlying documentation that we requested. Very important, making sure that there were no limits on our scope. And finally, we did issue a letter to the board dated February 23rd that covered all of these matters. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions on either the presentation or the audit or the financial statements or any other questions.
Thank you very much. I think Director Mekachek, you wanted to say a few words before we take questions, or do you want to wait till?
I can wait till after.
Okay. All right. So do any of us have questions on the very nice and tidy audit, I will say? No questions from the board. Any public comment? I don't see anyone in the room.
No hands raised on
Not
that.
online either. Okay, so let's bring it back to the board and Director Mekachek.
Hi. I have a couple of comments. We had an audit committee meeting on the 3rd of March, and we were unanimous in voting in favor of recommending the financial statements. And I wanted to say it's pretty hard not to have that unanimous recommendation with a clean opinion. So that's a good thing. And then I also wanted to say that that required board communications slide that was one of the last slides was very important. And it all seems very boring, and that's a good thing. You know, you don't want to have any controversy in the required communications, so it's all good. And I think we can compliment both our CFO and the finance team at SVCE, and also the firm that we outsource our accounting to, which is Mar Accountancy. So I think it's all good. I just wanted to make those comments.
And we shouldn't forget to thank the Audit Committee and Chair Mekachek. So thank you very much. I mean, you're right. I love boring audits because they are good news. So do we have any comments that we want to make? Or does someone just want to make a motion? Or we're just receiving this. Do you need a motion or?
Yes.
Okay, so do I have a motion to accept the audit?
Motion to accept the audit.
Thank you very much. All right, and Director Lee seconded. Okay.
Thank you. Director Fruin.
Aye.
Meadows.
Aye.
Barbadillo.
Aye.
Swan. Aye. Lee.
Aye.
Risto.
Aye.
Mekachek.
Aye.
Showalter.
Aye.
Page.
Aye.
Hilton.
Aye.
Thank you. Srinivasan.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries.
Excellent. Zipping right along, we'll move to number 5. I was betting with myself whether I'd remember we'd move forward to consent or not, and I did. So yay me. So number 5, adopt resolution approving the fiscal year 25-26 mid-year adjusted operating budget. And this is our CFO again.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide, Andrea. Just a little background. We adopt the budget in annual budget starting in September. Then we adjust it in December, which now hopefully with the fiscal year change, we don't have to do 3 months adjustment. And the reason we do this again as a reminder in December is because that's when we have the much better information about what PG&E rates and PCIA charges will be, which have a significant impact on our revenues. Now, this is the mid-year budget, and in December, we just update the power supply expenses and the revenue component. In the mid-year, we do a full adjustments, including all the other other operating expenses other than power supply expenses. So everything is updated, including reflecting the final PG&E generation rates and PCIA and the impact on our revenues. So I guess this is an action item. We ask that the board now adopt this as the ongoing budget for the current fiscal year. So I'm going to highlight the changes from the December budget, compare key items that have shifted and moved. Again, talk about how the rates came out, the final rates compared to what we were projecting. We will also do a 5-year financial overview, and then we'll take any questions and ask for the committee to take this up for a vote. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide basically has the all the highlights of what we're presenting today. The negative financial outlook, which we have been forecasting for some time since last year, that trend continues. Unfortunately, it deteriorates further as energy prices have continued to come down. And as you know, that when energy prices come down, the PCIA predominantly goes up for us, and also the PG&E generation rates can come down. So the key metric that we use for our financial health and financial liquidity is the days cash on hand, liquid days cash on hand. And in the December budget meeting, we were projecting at the end of the 5-year forecast period 200 days cash on hand. Now we're projecting a lower number, 142. And that's predominantly driven by the decline in energy prices. And these are all components of power supply prices. That's energy. RPS prices, resource adequacy prices, and GHG-free green attribute prices. So what you're going to see when I shift, I'm on the dark blue box here. When I shift to the beige box, you'll see that fiscal year 26 starts looking very good. But that's not, but I'm going to have to spoil that good news, is that basically any gains we're making in 26, we will basically have to give that up in 2027 and then some, because of the continued decline in prices. And the reason for that is remember how PCIA and PG&E rates are set. Under the CPUC's rate making mechanism, there's a balancing account, right? So which gets trued up when next year's rates will be determined. So when 2026 rates were set, the CPUC basically used a forecast of what they thought or the market prices would be for 2026. And that forecast was obvious. As prices have come down, the forecast was higher. So now the prices have come down. That means when it comes to PCIA, PG&E is saying, hey, I'm collecting less revenues in the PCIA from these departed customers, such as CCA, our customers, because these resources that are in the PCIA, where the financial exposure goes to our customers, now are more out of market. You know, they were bought at a higher prices. Now prices come down. That difference, what we call mark to market, that negative mark to market is much higher number for them. So that will come back to us in a form of a higher PCIA in fiscal year 2027. On the other side, the PG&E rates, PG&E also use a forecast of 2026 rates to set their bundle customer rates. Now they're basically what is over collecting, because as prices have come down, the cost of procurement to some extent has come down, right? So when the CPUC trues up the balancing account, they will say, okay, PG&E will return that money back to bundle customers, so that will bring their rates down. So their rates coming down and PCIA going up, that basically reduces our margin. So that's the story here. Don't bank on the improvement in fiscal year 26, because we're gonna give this up next year. So now turning to the beige box, coming back to the current fiscal year budget. At the December budget, we were projecting a withdrawal from reserves of 60.5 million. Now that number has improved by 48 million, so the draw on reserves has come down to 12.5 million. Okay, so, and the reason is two parts, right? One is that our power supply costs have come down, because now we can buy power a lot cheaper on the market. And there's one true gain that we can count on, and that's the increase in revenues coming from a favorable PCIA regulatory outcome. And that basically is the CPUs. PG&E had taken a very aggressive approach of valuing the battery in the PCIA, battery energy storage systems in the PCIA portfolio, saying they had a zero value for RA in the resource adequacy market. The PUC took a more reasonable approach and used the methodology used in setting Southern California Edison's rates, and saying, which recognizes that there is some value. Obviously, there is value. CPUC did the right thing, although we could argue could be even better. But that improves our revenues. So those are the two big drivers that changed the current fiscal year projections from what we discussed at the December meeting. Now coming back to the last box there, in the light green there, the fiscal year 27 outlook, as I said, the gain in 26 is going to be more than offset in 27. And these are based on our projections using all the limitations we have with the data and the uncertainty in prices. No one can nail these prices, but we have done a good job in projecting our financial trend to date. So now we're projecting fiscal year 27. At December, we were projecting at 81 million. Now we're projecting it to be 131 million withdrawal from reserve. So that's a deterioration of $50 million. Okay, so that's the main story of this budget. Next few slides, I'm just going to provide supporting data to to go through these points. And with that, we'll go to the next slide. So here's how the budget looks. The first column there shows the what we projected in December. The middle is the proposed new mid-year budget. You can see now the withdrawal from reserves is 12.5 million as opposed to 16.5 million. And again, the big movers, if you look at the data there, is the improvement in revenues and the significant reduction in power supply expense. Okay, and then we have some minor adjustments in other operating expenses, mainly a $500,000 reduction, and some investment income coming down close to $1 million as now we have less reserves, and also as the interest rates, the returns with market interest rates coming down are lower. Okay, and we'll go to the next slide. So here I'm showing the comparisons of rate, what we had used to set the revenue forecast in the December budget versus the actual rates that came out. You can see the PCIA moved only slightly for us, but you can see the significant increase in the PG&E gen rates, which attributes about 20 million improvement in revenue. But you recall from a previous slide, I showed you 16 million. The difference there is there are some other line item movements that where we have some customer rates on tied to index prices that also comes down as prices come down. Okay, and we'll go to the next slide. So here is the 5-year projection showing ending reserves at 142, and just a quick recap of what we mean under the business as usual scenario with additional liquidity. So this is a business as usual scenario means the way we have been setting rates, which is at a competitive advantage to comparable PG&E rates. And all the numbers shown here are for the end of each respective projected fiscal year, what the ending days cash on hand balance would be. The additional liquidity assumptions as we had discussed at the December meeting, first let me remind you about the light and the dark blue lines, bars here. The light blue is what we're actually measuring our financial liquidity with, and the light blue basically looks at all the funds that the board has at its discretion, which includes the funds in our reserves, as well as funds that the board has allocated in the budget to what we're calling now earmark funds, largely decarbonization programs, where we have programs implemented, but we haven't yet spent the money. And as we've always discussed, the board always has the discretion to always divert any unspent funds. So we measure our liquidity based on the light blue line. And as the customer uptake of a program increases, the two bars get closer, but we're assuming rather than going to parity at the end of the 5-year forecast, that it's reasonable to assume that there will be some lag and we would still have a $25 million balance. That's one assumption of additional liquidity, where the additional liquidity is coming from. The other is when we do the budget, when we present the budget, we always include contingencies, so we don't exceed our budget and have to come back to the board, because we need some contingencies. We can't always perfectly hit the projected budget. But over a 5-year period, it's not reasonable to assume that we need that level of contingency. So from the base case assumption, from the base case, without the additional liquidity assumptions, we have taken $6.5 million out of the operating expenses for each of the years, each of these 5 years. Okay. So that's and again, the decline in our days cash on hand, which basically means withdrawal from reserves, is due to the decline in energy prices and the impact on our margin via PCIA and PG&E gen rates. Okay, so next slide. Yeah, so those were all the highlights of the budget. So that brings me to the summary slide, which again says fiscal year 26 improves, but don't run to the bank yet. Those dollars will be given back most likely given back next year. in the form of higher PCIA and lower PG&E gen rates. So we are going to continue to work on the financial levels analysis started last year. That's the next agenda item. We are in good financial position despite this outlook because of the reserves we have built, knowing that this kind of uncertainty and this kind of possibility is an outcome that we should have prepared for and we have prepared for. And the critical period that we should look at the entire 5 year, but the critical period we always look at is the 2 year. And the reason 2 year is more critical is because of this balancing account impact. And over the 2 year period, we're still projecting to be above 350 days cash on hand, our target days cash on hand. However, if the 5 year trend prevails, it's good we need some levers in our pocket, right? So in case we need to make whatever adjustments we need to make as more data comes in and as we continue to forecast going forward, so that we're in a position to make any updates we need to the business as usual operating scenario, because we want to be prudent in how we manage our financial stability going forward. And in addition to the financial levels analysis, we are going to continue to do our financial stress test analysis as we do every year. And that's, if you remember, that's how we set our reserves. We've had some discussions already with the Finance Committee last week. We're going to bring the analysis to the Finance Committee in May and then to the board in June, where we'll have further discussion on what the additional stresses that could occur on top of what we're experiencing and what implications are and the game plan with the financial levels analysis going forward. With that, I'm ready to take any questions on this, and then can go for the vote.
Thank you very much. Do we have questions? I'm looking towards the right side. I'm not noticing any. I'll come back again. Yes, go ahead, Director Showalter.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. My question is about the revenues. You said, if I understand it correctly, you said that the energy revenues have gone up because of a decision of the CPUC. But what if revenues go up because we sell a lot more energy because of AI? Is that figured into this yet, or is it something we'll figure in our future stress tests?
So, good question. We do have a load forecast that Maren went through and in the December, and how we plan to account for load growth. So load growth, so a lot of that depends on the model which we're operating and the cost to serve that load. So there are a lot of risks there that we need to weigh and go through, and we will work with the committees and the board when we get to that, addressing how we want to create a rate for that customer class, because there's also a lot of risk, right? If we procure and lock in power prices and that load doesn't materialize, for example, that could end and the prices come down, and that portion of the procurement that we procure on behalf of the customer becomes stranded or negative mark to market. That would not be a good outcome. But there are ways in which we can mitigate that risk, and I don't want to jump ahead of that without us having finished our analysis. But that presentation will come to the board as we anticipate taking on this load. But in terms of the forecast, that could either increase the risk profile, or it may have no impact on risk profile. For example, if we offered index rates that float with the market, that would take most of this risk, the risk away. And if we have some customers on index rates where we don't take market risk with them, but they still contribute to our bottom line, so it's always positive in that sense. So there are many of these mechanisms that we're going to address. So there could be upside, and there could be some downside depending on how we want to approach pricing with these customers.
So it sounds like it's just a big class of sources of volatility that we'll have to consider moving forward.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions down this way? Yes, Director Barbadillo.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Help me understand, revenues are up and we continue to dip on our reserves. How is that correlated?
Revenues are actually significantly down from last fiscal year. I don't have the exact number. I'd have to look at it, but they're significantly down. I'm saying revenues went up from the December forecast because there was that. Actually, can we go back to that? Let me see the slide. Yeah, so the revenues went up primarily because from the December forecast. What I'm saying is it went up because of favorable CPUC decision. So that's one element that helped us. So that's one element of the number that we can count on. But if you look at our power supply expenses, that's going down because power supply cost is going down. But I'm talking about these gains will be given up next year because next year's revenues will come down even lower. And the reason for that is because the PCIA will be even higher and PG&E's gen rate would likely be lower. And as you know, if you remember those boxes in the one of the slides, the blue portion is basically that squeezes that blue bar, and which is what determines our revenues, that times load.
All right, that was a long answer. But my question is why? I'm looking at the operating liquidity assumption graph, where there's the cash on hand, a projection for 5 years until 2029 to 30 that started in 25 to 26, right? If you look at that graph, and I know that we will discuss the next agenda will be the levers, but have we not discussed levers starting in 2025 when it started to decrease as to now and continues to decrease on the 5-year projection? What I've learned is sometimes when you make projections like this, you add additional years for informational purpose only, right? So with this decline, and we're still talking about levers, when do you believe, or what's the additional years on this 5-year projection? What's the projection? Will it continue to decline? Will it follow the straight downward line?
Amrit, can I try to
Yes.
answer you? Yeah.
Right.
So I think just going back to your original question about, what happened in 25, 26 versus 24, 25.
Right.
I think this is what we've been explaining last year as well, is PG&E's generation went down significantly. So what we charge our customers on a per kilowatt hour basis went down significantly from our portion of it, from something like 15 point something cents to now 10 point something cents. So we are just taking in less revenue from our customers on an average basis, right? And so in terms of, did we see this coming? Yes, we saw it coming. That is why we put aside so much money in reserves when we had the opportunity to put money in reserves. That's why we have 530 something days cash on hand when we only really need something closer to 300. And so the plan has been that the board has set in motion is that we will draw from that reserve in fiscal year 25, 26, and potentially 26, 27. But that if this forecast continues, we have to do something different, and that is raise our rates, reduce cost if we can, or
Right.
those are our two options, basically.
In the next 2 years, we're reaching our minimum reserves of 120 cash on hand. And we're still on the proverbial business as usual to catch up and be competitive with PG&E rates. So how could we be business as usual, right? In a sense that to be competitive with PG&E rates, when we're continuing to decline and we're dipping from reserves to catch up with, the business as usual theory that we aim. So what's the solution? I said, we have a target, right? Business as usual, competitive
Right.
PG&E rates.
Right.
But we continue to dip on our reserves just to balance our budget. Like what you're trying to have approved today, 12 million, additional 12 million to be withdrawn from the reserves.
Right.
But when we originally approved the budget, I assume and I believe that part of that budget was also from reserves. So how many million did we take from reserves on this 25?
So in December, when we brought the budget to the
Right.
board in December, they adopted what we called the mini budget. They approved withdrawing 60 million from reserve.
Plus another 12 million today on the original projected budget in the beginning of the fiscal year.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Right. So you said in the mini budget, we approved withdrawing 60 million
60
from
million.
the
And now that 60 million will only be 12.5 million. It's improved. So that's
It's
an
the same
improvement
same
from-
budget, same
Yeah.
year.
Same year. It's an improvement from December.
So we're not taking additional 12 million?
No,
We're taking
only
less.
12 million. We're taking less. We're withdrawing $48 million less than what we estimated in December.
So the mini budget that we approved in December, we're of 60, we're only getting 12.
Well,
Taking
in
it.
With taking,
Yeah,
withdrawing.
in December, our negative balance, what we had to draw from reserve was estimated to be $60 million. Because of the changes in our supply costs going down and the favorable ruling on PCIA, we are now only going to draw 12 million in fiscal year 25-26. So it's better. It's still negative, but that's
It
what the
is.
reserve was built for. That's why the board in past decisions said, let's build up this reserve so we can draw it down in future years.
We did. At some point, we have 531 cash on hand. This fiscal year, we have 245. 3 more years, we have 123, and we're nearing that minimum set that we put for cash on hand.
Right, that's why we're having the financial lever discussion, because we're not setting the budget for future years. We only set budget for this current fiscal year 25-26. But when we come to you again in, I don't know, Amrit, when do we come now for the new fiscal
We'll
year?
we'll come back again in September.
September. Then we will ask about what to do for the next year. How we're going to either use reserves or change our rate structure or change our cost
Right.
through programs.
And so rather, you can take it offline if needed, but I do think that we need to go to public comment, but also worth noting, and we can touch on it when we come back for deliberation, the Finance Committee did
Can
recommend.
I have last question, please?
Oh, you have another one? Okay.
When will we have the business as usual dream that we had to be very competitive with PG&E with all the things that's going on? Do we have a projection when, or have we been on that level
We've been below PG&E. We are below PG&E right now
right now?
because we're using reserves to balance our cost.
Okay. All right. Well, I hope to be at a lower or at par with PG&E without using reserves later on. If that's
Well,
a possibility.
So let's kind of save some of that for discussion if you want. Because, this is part of why we see this so often is because each time they're making us aware of where we stand, and this is actually improved over December, but still we're being cautious about the future. So let me see if there's any public comment. We can bring it back for deliberation. After that, I don't see anybody in chambers. Anyone online?
None online, Chair.
Okay, so we will bring it back. The Finance Committee looked at this very carefully. I don't know, Chair Morley, Srinivasan, would you care to say anything? You don't have to. but
No,
yes,
that's
please
what,
do.
yeah, we had a detailed discussion on this and then it was unanimous decision to pass it to the board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So do my colleagues have any further feedback given the discussion or the questions that we've been asking? Oh, go ahead, Director Makachuk.
I understand the questions that you were asking, and please rest assured that the Finance Committee asked all kinds of questions. And we were satisfied with the results, but of the answers to the questions. But I think the important thing is that this is the business as usual that we were looking at, was being proposed, just saying, here's what the projections are. But I don't want to steal the thunder, but the upcoming presentation on the levers, that's where, the alternatives are going to be discussed, what we can do. And I do think it's important to recognize that after the Finance Committee asked all these questions and we were satisfied with the answers, we did recommend unanimously that the board review this. So I just thought I should put a little context around that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Any other context? Okay, so we're being asked to adopt the resolution approving the fiscal year 25-26 mid-year adjusted operating budget. Again, I think that context is important. It's a tweak that shows improvement since our estimates over December. We're going to then look at what might work to take us beyond. And I think business as usual might have a pejorative implication to you, but it was really meant as a baseline, which might be a better way to think of that scenario, baseline rather than business as usual. And so that will take us into our next discussion. So do I have a motion to adopt the resolution?
So moved.
Approving? Thank you very much.
Second.
Second.
I think Risto might have beaten Showalter by a
Yeah.
hair.
it's a second.
Okay. Clerk.
Thank you. Director Hilton,
Aye.
Makachuk,
Aye.
Barbadillo,
Aye.
Risto,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Meadows,
Aye.
Fruin,
Aye.
Showalter,
Aye.
Srinivasan,
Aye.
Page,
Aye.
Swan.
Aye.
Thank you. That carries unanimously.
All right. So now Director Zagunis will head down to the hot seat. I mean,
Maybe as
podium.
he's coming up, maybe I can just
Yes,
say a
thank
few
you.
words about this. This is a really important discussion, and staff and myself appreciate all of the input that we've gotten from the board, community, other members. That's brought us to this point, because these are really hard and complicated conversations to have. And so I think when we say business as usual, Acting Chair Meadows, what we mean is sustaining the programs, the level of clean, and a rate discount is what we define as business as usual. That is where we are right now. It's where we've been since we started. So.
All right. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
No.
Nope.
Now can you hear me? All right. User error. Yes, we've all kind of already been speaking around this, but I'm here to talk again about financial levers. This is a very important strategic conversation for us. It's something, we've talked, the board has talked in the past about, how we prioritize things when SVCE has kind of it's a very positive financial picture for SVCE. What do we prioritize? Where does funding go? And this is really the inverse of that, is sort of having the conversation of, and what do we do when the financial forecast looks more negative? And that is what our current forecast shows, but also this is just a good, important thing for us to do and to have this conversation around, because this is always a possibility for us. And so making sure we're aligned on priorities and objectives and everything is really valuable. So appreciate the time. I know that this is where we are in the process, the Green Star. I know that some of you are on some committees that have already seen a version of this presentation. So I appreciate your patience with me tonight. I do know that I think about half of the folks on the board, though, have not seen the presentation before. So I'm going to make sure that I kind of hit some of the key points, but I'm going to keep it moving because I do want to focus on time for conversation. But we are here, we're still in the discussion phase, and then in June, we'll come back to the board with the goal of really saying, here are a couple final options that we could pursue as scenarios and get the board's feedback and kind of direction there. And then, as Monica said earlier, we would take that in future budgets to sort of incorporate those decisions, those priorities in the budgets that come back to the board so that in future years, we're reflecting that. Today, going to run through this agenda. I think my focus is getting feedback from you all on the shape of the example scenario I'm going to share, and then any additional information as you think about the next time we have this conversation, and it's a little bit more decision focused. So this is related to the bar chart that Amrit showed. This red line is the same as the taller of his two bars. And really, it just shows, today we're at 530 days cash on hand. Yes, the 5-year forecast has us going all the way down to 140. In the next 2 years, we're showing a pretty big draw from reserves, but that is still keeping us above our target reserve level. And so, just in terms of the timing where we are, this is what this forecast looks like. Back in December, we talked about financial levers. That's where we first started talking about this. There are several that we can pursue. The big one is the rate. There's also programs. There's our voluntary clean position. And each of those has different effects on sort of the drawdown of reserves over time under this forecast. And then we also talked about SVCE and who we are, and that's both the mission, which is to reduce dependence on fossil fuels, and to do so by providing carbon-free, affordable, and reliable electricity, as well as innovative programs for our communities. And we also discussed the value proposition, and this is sort of the translation of the mission in some ways to our customers. It's the way we present ourselves to them. It's what we try to build that they see in us. And so that's things like local projects, finding out that your neighbor installed a heat pump with us. That looks like community reinvestment. Local presence and control, that's you all, that's us here tonight. That's the ability of people to show up, find us at a art and wine festival or some event that we are tabling, or to come by the office and talk to us, get us on the phone. Clean power in the grid, Monica mentioned all of the great investments that we have made and continue to make in building new clean supply. Competitive rates, we've talked a lot about that, both in terms of being near PG&E. We've historically always been at a discount to PG&E. And our work on the decarb transition, so actually helping all of the local communities make this transition. So that's the value proposition, and I think we've been delivering all of that. We try to help our customers see that and really feel that, and that's part of what we want them to associate with SVC and the work we do on the mission. I've added a little bit of info from based on the feedback from the committee. So this is the first one. On the left, you can see our total load in a given year. And really the takeaway for this pie chart is residential is about 1/3 of SVC's total load. They make up the vast majority of our number of accounts, right? But each one is much smaller than a large commercial or industrial customer. So 1/3 of our load. And then on the right, I have a emissions over time chart. So this is just looking back to when SVCE first, or before we formed, 2015. Emissions from electricity sector, from buildings, and from transportation. Over time, the emissions has really come down. That's SVCE's, the clean supply that we offer. And the remaining emissions are really in the buildings and in the transportations in our area. I also wanted to talk about the rate for a second. In 2026, the average customer bill is about $194 for residential customers. And you can see that's the gray line at the top. And the gray line shows also what the cents per kilowatt hour is, which is about 40 cents per kilowatt hour. But you can see only about a quarter of that is SVCE's part of the bill, is the generation side, which is the orange line. The blue line is T&D, transmission distribution. So when you look back in 2019, those lines were almost the same. I mean, T&D was still a little higher, but it was roughly 50-50. And the rate was only 25 cents per kilowatt hour. So the total bill was much smaller. So this just shows that over the last 7 years, T&D has grown, essentially doubled. And that means that our part of the bill, when we think about affordability and for our customers, what they see on a bill, our part has gotten much smaller, which means our ability to influence the overall kind of customer affordability has gotten smaller in this way. And I'll remind you this, customers usually get bills that have electricity and gas in them if there's someone who hasn't yet made the fully electric transition. And so it can be even further hard to figure out where exactly your charges are even coming from or what's associated with what bills are very confusing for customers. And so anyway, just these are all things to keep in mind as we have this conversation. And then in December, we got some feedback from you all. I've listed some of the key points here. We'll come back to that in a second, so I'm going to just move forward. So thinking about our costs, this is the PG&E projected cost over the remainder of the financial forecast that we're looking at, 10, 11 cents. And remember, there's a T&D portion on top of that customers see as well. So when you translate that, as Amrit just went through, into what the SVCE gen rate might look like over this forecasted period, you take out the PCIA that we forecast, you take out our 1% discount currently, and you get what our gen rate is. And that's the SVCE revenue side of the equation. When you look at the cost side of the equation, you see how that's built up. And that's, predominantly the base supply cost is what I labeled it here. What that is really is the costs that SVCE incurs to serve our load. It's the cost that we're obligated to meet it. We have procurement orders. We have there's a minimum compliance level in terms of RPS and what our clean portfolio needs to look like. So that's all in that big base supply cost. And then we have our operating expenses, our program spend forecast based on the allocated program dollars, and the voluntary clean position, which is really the incremental clean goals that the board has adopted for SVCE. And so as you can see, there is a gap between the cost side and the revenue side. And it's not quite as large as that because we do have other income revenue from our income from our reserves. And we have prepay savings, which the board has approved several prepays for SVCE, and those do have material savings for us in this way. So we have this gap, and this is what we're talking about. This is consistent with that drawdown from reserves. We're basically saying under this forecast, the way we set our rate today is pulling in fewer revenues than we need in order to meet our costs. And we are covering that under this forecast with our reserves. And that's what our reserves are there for right now, is to allow us that ability to do that. But over time, we will want to stop doing that if this continues, right? We can't draw down forever. We would need at some point to say, well, we need to stop drawing from reserves. And so that's kind of what the financial levers conversation is ultimately about. One thing that I learned from really pulling this chart together with others at SVCE is that the voluntary clean, the program spend, they're pretty small compared to the gap that we're talking about. And so when we think about this long term across all these levers, what this shows is that if we decided we needed to stop pulling from reserves on an ongoing basis, under the current forecast, we would need to raise our revenues in order to close the gap fully. That's an inescapable math conclusion at the end of this. We don't have to do that right now. We are not there right now. We just saw how many days cash on hand we have. But that's just as a kind of ongoing operational sense. I think it's important to think about that could be a future if this forecast were to just continue indefinitely, which it won't. I'll get into uncertainty in a second. The forecast is going to change because that's what forecasts do. Taking one brief step back, zooming out, this is what we just went through, but I wanted to compare it to the 2025 rates, because right now we're in this kind of 2026 and onwards. This is what 2025 looked like. So you see the PG&E rate, the star, was about 5 cents higher, and PCIA was also much smaller. And so the SVCE rate, even at a larger discount, at the 4% discount, was actually a little bit under twice where we are today. And so this is what Amrit was talking about, right? There's this sort of double whammy when the gen rates come down and the PCIA gets bigger as it sort of shrinks what SVCE is looking at for our revenue side. So under this scenario back in 2025, assuming our costs were roughly the same, which they probably were close to, the gap was in the other direction. It was to the positive. And that was why 2 years ago, we were having conversations around, hey, when we have more positive financial situations, how do we allocate the funds? Where do we go? Rates versus programs versus clean. So it's the same conversation. It's just being driven by where the revenues are now. Talking about uncertainty for a second. This is our forecast. The orange bar is an illustrative example of what the sort of uncertainty looks like. And what this says to me is, as we progress, we will get more certainty over where the forecast is headed. And so part of the question that we're faced with is, what actions do we take in the near term? What kind of steps do we want to take that we're comfortable with now that also potentially buy us time if the forecast is accurate? And we do see this happen as we're modeling. But it could get better on its own. It could get worse on its own. We don't know, and so we're kind of operating under this uncertainty. And that's why, because we've built the reserves up so much, we have given ourselves this time to think this through. I'll also note at the very bottom, I put little stars showing there's also going to be moments where we get new information. So Amrit and Monica both talked about this ruling on PCIA and the valuation, and it improved our position by $20 million. That's like a single moment where all of a sudden it changes the trajectory of the forecast. And so there will be more of those moments. Some will be positive, some will be negative. And on top of that, there's going to be kind of market condition changes that are just happening due to everything that's going on. Yeah, go for it.
Just point of clarification. This slide is similar to the blue bars, right? The dark blue and the light blue bar. This is just a graph.
This is just a graph. The red line is the same as the taller bars from Amrit's slide. Yep. Okay, so going back to the value proposition for a second. I'm going to move through this part pretty quickly, but just to think about this, I think it's pretty clear that if we make a decision like moving to a less clean product at some point, it is harder for us to continue to push the part of our value proposition that's associated with clean power in the grid. We still can. There's still things that we're doing, and being a slightly less clean product doesn't make us not clean. It just means that we would talk about some of the things we're doing differently. We're still investing in clean projects. We're still doing a lot of these same things, but it would be less, so it would be a little harder. If you stop running local programs, customers aren't going to see that reinvestment happening in their communities. They're also not going to be driving the sort of market transformational change that we're looking for in the region. And both of those things will also have an impact on our mission, right, in some ways, because we're kind of not driving the emissions down as quickly as we would have otherwise been. And then raising rates above PG&E. So this we've talked a lot about. I think we all kind of have a sense for this. Depending on how high and how you define competitive, some customers, competitive means lower or at parity, and that's what competitive means for them. Some customers might say, well, if you can do these other things for me and the premium isn't very high, then maybe I'd be willing to do that. So there's kind of a definition piece here, but I think as we raise rates above PG&E, this also becomes more difficult for us to own it. And so that means there's no easy answer across all these things, right? And so I'm going to take speak for a second back to the point I made about the math sort of showing that it is possible under the current forecast that we would have to raise rates at some point if it continued. Because thinking about that means that the decisions we make in the near term, like let's say we chose to really phase out some parts of our value proposition, but we still at the end of the day had to raise our rates, it would mean that we had kind of eroded a lot of different parts of our value proposition. So it's just, and that's probably true in any configuration that you do this in. The point ultimately is, I think what we want customers to associate with SVCE and be the reason that they want to be with us, the reason that we are competitive overall is all 5 of these, right? We want it to be all of that. But we also know that different customers have different priorities. They view things differently. So I'm going to get to my example now. And again, this is an example. So it is not what we're proposing right now. It's not what the final thing is going to be. It's just trying to give you a sense of what these scenarios could look like. And so for this one, We said, well, what if we moved our default clean product? So it remained clean, but we moved it to a 4% premium. And that would be about $2 a month of an increase for residential customers on, again, about a $200 bill. So it's about a 1% delta. And for non-res customers, you can think about it, it's about 1%. So if they have a $1,000 bill, it's 1% of that. If they have a $100,000 bill a month, it's 1% of that. We could create a new minimum compliant product that we would keep at a discount, and that would be for the price sensitive customers, but it would not be as clean as our default product. And then in this scenario, we would let customers opt down. So they would start on the clean product, and then they could call us. They could say, hey, I'd really prefer to opt down to this other one. We would also reduce our program spend some amount. So again, trying to pull all the levers a little bit, basically. And for this modeling, I said, well, let's say we started this in calendar year 2027. But that's also a decision that the board would make ultimately as we adopt budgets, as we would say, well, when do we start doing this to make sure that we're kind of getting ahead of things, but also taking advantage of the reserves that we have. You see the impacts on the right here, but I'm going to jump ahead to this kind of visual impact, which is, you see the red line is the base case we've been talking about. And so this scenario, what it would do is would increase our final days cash on hand by about 75. And it would also buy us time. You can think about that kind of moving to the right when we hit certain milestones. So for this one, I pulled out the 250 days cash on hand milestone because it ended up being roughly a year later. So that's if we started in calendar year 2027. If you start in calendar year 2028, then you don't get quite as much of a shift until later because you've used some of your time. This scenario largely aligns with the board's input, which was kind of to take a balanced approach. There was a lot of different conversation around different things that are priorities to different communities, to different customer types. And it, as you noted, it didn't fully close the gap, but it did raise it a little bit. So it's something that we could take as an initial step, given the level of uncertainty in the forecast. All right. So coming back to this, where we are, again, looking for discussion today. I'm going to take some notes based on what everyone tells me and gives me feedback on. And we'll be moving this towards, in June, trying to bring probably a handful of specific scenarios to you all to really vet and compare against each other and ultimately give us direction on, yeah, this is the scenario that we prefer. And then that's one that we would work on implementing into future budgets for consideration. I think I've already covered this, so I'm just going to call it there and pass it back to you.
Okay, thank you very much. A lot of thought, obviously, has gone into that, and no crystal ball, but some good things to think about. So, but I think what I want to do is just see if there's public comment, and then, because I think this might be a discussion that's conducive to question and discussion at the same time. So I don't see anyone in chambers, anyone public comment online.
No hands raised, Chair.
Okay, so questions and comments at the same time. Would anyone like to, yes, go ahead, Director Risto.
Thank you. I do have a quick question first. If you can go back to the example scenario slide, where you talk about the default clean product. Okay.
This one.
That one. So in terms of looking at how it could move us out a year with days cash on hand, what assumptions were made in terms of, or does it wash if somebody decides to go from the default clean product with a 4% premium and goes to the other?
It roughly washes was the intent with that. Yeah.
Okay. So kind of, it doesn't matter how it shifts largely because of the offset with lower generation price and then the 1% discount.
Yes.
Okay. And then a comment is, you're right. The math is the math. And thinking about if ultimately, as you talked about different programs or benefits being reduced first, it's a small part of the gap. And so if we did those things first and then ultimately had to raise our price compared to PG&E, we'd already have erased every other advantage. And then in terms of the identity of Silicon Valley Clean Energy, getting rid of the programs, getting rid of the outreach. And then after those things are gone, if we're still in a position and then we have to raise rates compared to PG&E, there's really no strong incentive, right? And so for me, thinking about that, those other programs are a small piece of that gap, I would be a little worried about, taking chunks out of those first. I do like this example scenario because it kind of hits a middle ground. It's just my thought at the moment.
Director Showalter?
Yeah, I wondered about the differential in cleanliness between PG&E's product and our product. I can't remember what PG&E's clean rate is now, but I think one of the things we should always report on is how much cleaner we are than PG&E. And when we think about getting less clean, we would want to make sure we were cleaner than PG&E in order to maintain our value proposition, like we're talking about in our, and to portray ourselves as cleaner. So I think that, keeping in mind what PG&E is, and I know that's going to change over time, that's an important component as well.
Yeah, and I think that when I bring the scenarios, I plan to bring some of the emissions sort of estimated impact piece as well for those. I will say though, we talk about being clean. We don't in our marketing to customers, we don't talk about being cleaner because we will get to a point where we and PG&E are like there's very few emissions coming from both of our portfolios, and I think we associate our kind of clean position with a lot of the work we do on driving these new builds, on the local work with the emissions, like buildings and transportation as well. So we try to define clean pretty broadly, but you're right that we certainly have some customers that we talk to who are looking for the cleanest product. And so from a competitive kind of standpoint, that is something that folks, they do look at both, right? And so I think it's a fair point for us to think about.
Well, I guess too, I feel like we should be aware of how close we are to PG&E going forward. I don't know that, and I'm sure it's readily available information, but I haven't looked it up lately. And people do ask me that. Well, how much cleaner are you? And so I think it's an arguing. It's a point of discussion.
Can I chime in a bit, Dustin? It is a hard thing we don't know what PG&E is going to do 1 year to the next year. And they have such a vast portfolio with a lot of kind of flexibility in how they can use their portfolio for compliance or for meeting their customer needs. We don't really find out what PG&E, how clean they were until after the fact. And so it's hard. They don't report that. What we all report in our filings, we all have to do this integrated resource plan. And in that integrated resource planning, we have to show what our plan is to get to 2045. And from there, we can kind of gather what PG&E is trying to do, but a lot of it is very dependent on their portfolio. They have a vast portfolio of hydro, and hydro changes year to year. So their ability to be clean changes year to year. So while it's something that we also care very much, because we want to make sure that that's something that we achieve. It's just really hard to do it until you don't find out until 6 months after the year's passed what they ended up being. So.
But Monica, as you said, what are we forecasted to be for next year? 107% clean?
So for the next couple of years, I guess they can get cleaner. They can be 200% clean, but we are at least 100% clean, 105% clean for calendar year 2025 and 2026, assuming that nothing happens with any of our resources, that we don't have major droughts, that the nuclear power plants don't go out. So a lot of stuff can change still, but that's where we are.
It's impressive.
I won't ask how that math works. Maybe somebody else can. Any questions or discussions? Director Page, yes.
That's the question I got. How do you get to 107% clean? I'm a math major and I have trouble with that one.
Yeah, so when we report our 100% clean, it's on retail sales. And so there's a 7% loss factor associated with transmission. So we have to buy 7% more to cover losses. That's why we target 107% clean.
So PG&E would have the same issue.
Exactly. Yeah, we all do.
And we're all supposed to be at 100% clean at
We,
2045.
by 2045, we all need to be 100% clean of our retail sales. So it allows for 7% margin that doesn't have to be clean. But our target that the board adopted was 107% or 100% plus losses.
So what differentiates SVCE from PG&E in 2045, other than the fact they do transmission?
Well, that's the point that Justin made. We're all going towards the same place in terms of cleanliness. It's just we've accelerated it. We decided to get there quicker. And we've also, the board has directed us to invest in new clean resources. And so we're building at a very fast rate, new solar, new wind. We had some new geothermal built in a couple years ago, but in that regard, I'm not going to say better, but we're doing a lot. We're doing much more than what's required of us through the law, I guess.
Okay, well, I'm too new to say the things I want to say, so I'm going to hold back.
Anyone else? Director Mekchek.
So we're going to hear about the results of a stress test in the future, and then how does that integrate or work with the financial levers? Can you just talk about that, because I know it's in the future, but how does that fit?
Yeah, I think the stress test in some ways is like the bottom of the uncertainty curve, is how maybe I would frame it, right? Is that you're kind of right, you're finding out where that is.
Kind of a worst case scenario.
Yeah.
If everything goes bad that could possibly go bad, that's, where are we going to be?
Yeah, I don't know how Amrit would describe it. That's how I would largely describe it. But yeah, and so I think the decisions that we make on some of the feedback and kind of prioritization and thinking through these scenarios that we do, even under a base case scenario, we would still apply to a stressed scenario. It's just the decisions would have to come faster, essentially, because we're burning at a faster rate.
Yeah, I can, I think that one of the things that Amrit's been explaining to us the last few years that he's brought the stress test to the board is that the worst kind of stress, the one that we're more susceptible to or that impacts us the most, is falling energy prices, because that impacts PCIA. And that's essentially what we're living right now, right? So that's the what he called the extreme but plausible scenario is essentially what we've been planning for. And that's why we built up so much reserves. So I think that the stress test that he does, the next one, unless there's something new that, is worse than what we've seen in terms of PCIA and falling gen rates, I doubt that there's going to be anything that shows that we have to plan for additional and more extreme reserves.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll come over here and then I'll come to you, So Director Lee.
So we've been talking about the fears, been the fact that energy prices will go down. Last we saw, actually just read the oil prices back to $100 a barrel. Strait of Hormuz is closed indefinitely. How would that affect the PG&E's rate, given the fact that oil prices, of course, affect energy prices throughout the world? How does that affect the PG&E rates? And if it actually raises PG&E rates, would that in turn actually be financially positive for this organization?
Well, I'll give a simple answer, and then Monica can expand on it. But
Easy one. That's okay.
yeah, I mean, I think that is a perfect example of something that when I was making this slide, I didn't have a star in mind for something like that. But that's exactly the kind of thing where we're going to see what the ramifications are of everything, and this will have implications for the energy markets, potentially, depending on how long it goes. And I know that oil is correlated with natural gas, and natural gas has impacts on this. But there's also some mitigating factors that are out there in terms of, I think it was a relatively mild winter here in California, and so we have like quite a good amount of storage of natural gas. So it may not be one for one or kind of showing up right away, and so it's hard to know. But I think yes, that's the kind of thing that if it drives up our energy prices or the energy market prices, then it has the inverse effect of what we're looking at right now.
Yeah, all the same, we monitor market prices very closely. We monitor natural gas prices and electricity prices on a forward basis. We look at it every day, quite frankly. We mark our portfolio every week. We have not seen a change in the electricity market prices. And I think that's a testament to the fact that California, with its development of clean resources, has kind of insulated itself from these big shocks that happen on a global level, because our marginal resource is no longer natural gas all the time. It's renewables, it's solar, it's hydro, it's other resources. So that's a good thing. But the thing that we probably should be worried about is the natural gas price. And yes, we do have storage right now of natural gas reserves, but if those get depleted, and then our customers, all of our customers that have gas, will be seeing the impacts of higher gas prices and natural gas prices in the winter when they're heating their homes. So that's probably when we'll see the impact, if we see an impact.
Right, because for natural gas, I guess, good thing is that we had a fairly mild winter this side of the country. And of course, we are not going to be worried too much use of natural gas for heating because we are now going spring and summer. So that need nationwide actually will be decreasing. This is good. I guess the follow-up question is, does PG&E still use oil to generate electricity? That would affect that? Not at all, right? So they don't.
No, not at all.
Now, we do know other utilities around the country might, but not in California that we know of. So that should matter to us. Right. Thank you.
Director Barbadia?
Thank you, Chair. I have a suggestion, 2 questions, and a comment. Right. With regards to the suggestion, I hear programs that we're discussing the levers. How about some legislation? Maybe we could push some legislation through lobbying and joining other groups like us to curb what we believe we can on those levers, especially what PG&E may be doing freely. I don't know if there is something, right? Like the PCI and things like that.
Yeah, I think it's a great flag, both the legislative side and the regulatory side, right? Like with the CPUC and other proceedings. And so we do engage on many of those, and I'm sure we were engaged on the one where this ruling came through recently, where it had positive outcome for us. I have no doubt that our team was part of trying to push for that, but I think that that is part of the potential positive uncertainty in that band. Are there other things that we could advocate to change that would help our forecast in that way? And I think this isn't, I know we're not sort of speaking to this, but just to say it, I think that's also true on the transmission and distribution side, is something that we're watching, because it has implications for our customer affordability, even though it's not something that's necessarily directly affecting our finances. Sure.
Yeah, if we could look at that, especially the legislative committee.
Yeah, I know that, I don't know if Ben is still in the audience, but Benna is our legislative.
She is here.
Oh, she is here.
Yes.
But we have 2 bills that we are pushing through CalCCA. They are our advocacy group. One of them is specifically related to PCIA and trying to improve the transparency around PCIA. And the other one is related to a very kind of wonky thing related to resource adequacy and trying to improve transactability so that we can lower our costs. Those are things that the board has supported, and I believe you're part of the legislative ad hoc.
That's about to be, yes.
Yeah, so that's where we talk about this stuff. But yes, I agree, both on the legislative and on the regulatory side, we're doing as much as we can with other CCAs as well.
All right. Well, thank you. So here's the question. You indicated that there may be a possibility with a forecast that prices will be raised, right? So when do you believe this will happen? What are the factors that will contribute to us raising rates?
So I think that if we were to decide to raise rates, it would be because we reach a point where, I think to your questions earlier, we decide, well, the drawdown on reserves is at a point where we want to take some action either to mitigate it and sort of slow the draw from reserves, or to try to reach a point where we're sort of at parity, where we say, hey, well, we're fully matching our costs during this period. We're no longer willing to use our reserves as kind of this rate stabilizing effect. The rate piece is just one part of it. I mean, there's also the programs, and so we could, as Amrit said, we have a chunk of unspent program dollars that we could choose. In my example, I said, let's say we didn't spend 10%. We could say, let's not spend 40% or something. That is a smaller part of the overall wedge, but it is still something we could do that would still mitigate. And then on the clean side, it's the same story. We could sort of move that back. So I think that's when we would do it, sort of in theory. I think the actual timing of when we would do it around probably it would be a budget update, or when Amrit brings the budget and we would say, hey, this is what the forecast says. We're getting to a point where we're concerned about what it looks like for next year or for this 5-year forecast, and so we are now proposing to kind of enact one of this scenario that I'm going to hope to have the board help us decide on in June, to say this is the approach we're going to take. And so that's how we would use that approach kind of at a budget moment where we would be adopting a budget. Does that answer your question?
Sort of. So when we reach a certain level, we're going to raise the price, bottom line, right? When we wanted not to drain the cash reserves anymore, when we have exhausted those levers that we're talking about, and we can't prevent the sliding down, we raise prices.
Yes, at some point, that's
at some point.
Yeah.
That's the trigger. So if that happens, would there be a time that our prices will be higher than PG&E?
Would there be a what? Sorry?
Our prices will be higher than PG&E.
They could be in that scenario, yes. It depends how much we would increase them. But under this example scenario, and basically what I tried to do is say, well, let's have one product that is higher than PG&E, but it's the clean product. And then we could have one that was 1% or maybe at parity with PG&E that is not as clean, but it would be to kind of retain the customers that are maybe more price sensitive in that way.
Would that be worrisome time if our prices will be higher than PG&E, both financially and our existence?
I think that's something that we're trying to sort of probe and understand. We have a survey out right now where we're trying to understand, our customers, our residential customers, willing to pay more for certain values that SVCE provides, or are they not? We do have data from other CCAs, and just to say this, we're not other CCAs. We have a unique set of communities. We have a unique load. I think we have a very high or very low proportion of residential customers compared to many other CCAs. So it's something we need to think about. But other CCAs have operated with higher rates than PG&E because each one sets it in kind of different ways. And many of them have very high participation rates still, some, in the 96, 97% range, just like SVCE. And so there's no guarantee that because we raise our rates that we will see kind of a mass departure of customers, but also that is a risk. So I think if you're asking, like, is it something to worry about? I think we would worry about it, and that's why we want to make sure that we're delivering on that whole sort of value proposition to keep those customers as much as we can.
All right. And lastly, the comment, right? So I believe that what we're doing is public service, right? And when each of us, or I, ask questions, maybe at some time I don't understand it, but most of the time it's because I want to satisfy our accountability and transparency. That's why I bring up questions, hopefully not just us who understands it, but we disseminate it to the public so they would understand our existence and they would understand the future actions that we have and the consequences thereof. And I don't doubt the wisdom of any committee or the staff when I ask questions. It's just for, as I said, transparency. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Thank you very much. I have comment question if unless any of my colleagues, I'm not noticing. Okay, so I will, and I'm not sure, I don't think this has occurred to me before, but listening to this, we obviously watch PG&E very closely. We watch CPUC, and we're making decisions, well, in the markets, of course, et cetera, et cetera. But as I look at the slide where you show the customer-facing value propositions, it seems to me, have we built into the forecast what happens when the former Vacuumed, now bad, um, so number 5 is accelerating electric upgrades in terms of customer-facing value propositions. In 2027, in theory, barring lawsuits and whatever else that might slow down the implementation, that is going to be a very rapid acceleration of electric upgrades. So have we incorporated in the forecast the scenario where we don't actually have to do that work because it's being done at a different level than us and everyone will be forced to do that? And if so, what does it look like if we dialed that back?
Yeah, great. It's a great question. It's a great thing for us to be thinking about. I think we certainly expect that as other rules come into play, it will change the makeup of the programs that we need to offer in order to spur growth. This is a topic that I think it's for next month that so this is, and it's going to be a really interesting conversation because Zoe will be presenting it and it will be on exactly this topic is kind of like, where are the programs going? Where do we want to head with this? We've got this suite of programs that the board has approved and funded and that we've been working on. And now we're looking at a pretty different set of 5 to 10 years where there's going to be rules that are in place that might be driving some adoption without us. There's also the potential for significant exceptions or people choosing to not comply with requirements and low-income customers. So there's a lot of questions still around, well, what would we fund? And so what Zoe and I are very connected on this as well. This financial levers, it connects to everything that we do. So it's involved in all these things. Essentially, the conversation that we have with the board then next month on the, what are we calling it? Integrated decarb roadmap. That will connect to this. And so I think Zoe has some scenarios. So it's like, we could do that at a $20 million level. We could do it at a $5 million a year level. It will change what our impacts are. It will change what we can do, but that's kind of what the discussion is going to be. So I think that will fit very nicely with that.
Right. And I think Director Risto had a really important point, which is, the rates are really the big driver and the programs are kind of smaller, but it's still important to keep an eye. And so I think Director Page talked about 2045 when we're all supposed to look alike, cleanliness wise. And then with some of these rules coming on board, appliances are going to look the same. So we have to, the base case, I won't say business as usual, but the base case has to recognize these stair steps as there's changes that are forced on all of us. And it might affect how we look at our advantages, our unique, to use the old lingo, USP, unique selling propositions or whatever. So it's very complicated. It's hard to be so granular, but it'll be an interesting conversation. They did not prime me with that. So have you gotten the kind of input and questions you want, or do you want any specific? Do you have another? Go ahead, Director Mekchek. Bless you.
I'll make another kind of observation comment that and question. I guess it's good, or sorry, one of the things I didn't see on the slide from before Christmas when we had the workshop was, I think customers really trust SVCE, and I think that makes them sticky, for lack of a better term, notwithstanding it's switching, the switching costs, how painful does something have to be before you actually switch? But the stickier the customers are, the better. And so 2 questions. First question is, if we offer a program, you must be an SVCE customer to get that, the rebates or the whatever is in the program. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So now my comment is, if customers have benefited from the programs that we've offered, I would think that would make them a little stickier and keep them with us. So that's kind of a comment. My next question is, and I think this will be my last question. If in a scenario with the levers that we're going to increase our rates or have some sort of a premium or parity, could we be describing that as, not permanent, but, for the next X years, we will be at parity. It's not going to be forever. It's something you're asking for, things to think about. That I think is something you may wish to consider.
Yeah, and I think maybe to generalize it, you're saying thinking about the way we would talk about what we were doing would be very important, right? And one approach would be to try to make clear that it's a time limited thing. I think depending on, it's hard to guarantee anything that we would do, as you know. I mean, we haven't ever guaranteed.
It's just an idea to explore.
No, but it's. I think it's a good point, and I also want to say on the stickiness piece, you're making Pam's day saying that you feel like customers trust us, because that is definitely a goal that we have, that we've tried to drive forward, and we see it in some of our survey results. But it's nice to hear. And definitely, I think program participants who go through our programs broadly do have good experiences with us. They do like it, so it increases stickiness in that way. And we also require that they remain customers if they get our incentives for a certain amount of time as well. So,
okay, thank you.
All right, so I think we have finished with our contributions and questions, unless you have a specific question for us. No?
I think that was great, and I'll just say, if anything else occurs to anyone, I'm happy to receive it. So.
All right. Well, thank you for that presentation and good discussion. So we're going to move on to wrap this up with board member announcements and any direction on future agenda items. I'll make an announcement since I have the microphone. I was fortunate to be invited. Well, it was focused around mass timber, but a mass timber tour of 330 Distal, which is our 90-unit, all affordable and all electric housing development going in Los Altos on El Camino. And it's, as I said, 90 units, all affordable. The EV charging through SVCE looks like the program is, they're in communication. So, and they are potentially going to, well, they say they're going to open up in July. So maybe we'll have ribbon cuttings for EV chargers and the new all-electric, all-affordable housing. So it's very exciting. And I like the mass timber, which is neither here nor there for this group. But any other announcements? Yes, Director.
Yes, inviting everybody that this Friday, the 13th, the second one this year, will be very lucky because we're having our state of accounting. Come around 5 o'clock, we'll open the door, I think around 5:30 or so, and the event will start 5:45. Try to get here early so that you could get a seat. We expect it to be full house. We will be opening also the INS room next door for overfill. There'll be lots of entertainment, good food, good singing, and get to hear yours truly to talk about what the county has done this past year and what we're going to do in the future. Thank you.
All right.
70 West Heading.
All right, very good. No other announcements? With that, I will adjourn this meeting, and I'll borrow Chair Klein's gavel. That was not very decisive. There we go. All right, thank you all.